Hey everyone. Before we launch into today's episode, I just want to acknowledge the shock that millions of people in the US and around the world experienced when a violent mob attacked the Capitol yesterday. I also want to acknowledge the fear and the anger many of us are feeling. The national and global events we're living through would be extraordinary all by themselves, and yet, here we are, dog paddling through them, all sloshed together in one mighty sea. Bearing witness to yesterday's blind violence can make anyone at any age feel helpless. And if that's how you're feeling today, or in the days to come, when who knows what else may unfold, I want to offer you a talisman, an amulet. Call it whatever you like. It's a small yet powerful source of protection, wisdom, and courage. You ready? Here it is. Whatever you do today and in the days to come, do it with as much love and passion as you can muster. Activate your heart of hearts until it glows, like the coils on an electric stove. Ignite your whole spirit into a light that makes starlight seem dingy. Now, I can see you rolling your eyes, thinking, what good is this frou-frou, wishy-washy juju? But hear me out. I speak in defense of love as a defense. It is hugely underrated and wildly counterintuitive, and yet it is also unmistakably invincible. Don't believe me? Then check with any of history's greatest leaders and teachers, spanning from Buddha to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Check with recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize, like Rigoberta Menchú, Betty Williams, or Mairead Corrigan, who chose to give anything but hate and violence after suffering at the hands of hate and violence. Check with Morihei Ueshiba, one of the all-time great martial artists who lived between the samurai and the Great World Wars. Ueshiba learned how to fight with weapons or hand-to-hand, and even he came to the conclusion that the only way to win was to love. Love yourself and love everyone else. Ueshiba, also known as O-sensei, founded an all-new martial arts school called Aikido. The word roughly translates into the way of harmony or the way of peace. In Aikido, the martial artist can never attack others, but can certainly defend herself. However, she cannot harm her attacker while resolving the situation. It's a tricky puzzle that I have personally practiced for about 13 years now. I practiced so hard, I was eventually ranked second-degree black belt. And here's what O-sensei passed on to his students. In his exact words, he said, "If your opponent strikes with fire, counter with water, becoming completely fluid and free-flowing. Water, by its nature, never collides with or breaks against anything. On the contrary, it swallows up any attack harmlessly." Now, as forms of energy go, love is pretty darn close to water. Nothing breaks it. Nothing defeats it. Which is why O-sensei said that the true meaning of a warrior or a samurai is one who serves and adheres to the power of love. I'm sure you've seen at least one good movie or documentary about the samurai, and I'm willing to bet you don't imagine those guys or gals in all their monstrous armor with deadly katanas swinging as frou-frou, wishy-washy juju people. And yet, they served the power of love. So again, I offer you this talisman. You may not be able to directly do anything about what's happening in Washington, D.C., or anywhere else, but right where you live, in your town, in your home, in your heart and soul, you can do this. You can generate love and passion. Then find ways to put that passion, that energy, to work. I, for one, have put my passion into this podcast, which is itself all about overcoming differences and igniting friendships where you least expect them. Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Blister and Muck podcast. I'm Jenny Mason, your host and the creator of the Blister and Muck series. This week, the rats board a train to Muck's country home. While they're on this journey, will they bite off more than they can chew? Now more than ever would be the perfect time to share with you listeners the history of trains and how they rose to prominence in the 19th century. Unfortunately, my producers insist that imparting this history now, no matter how much the mighty train is revered and esteemed, is just not practical. We're on a tight schedule now that Muck uncovered evidence suggesting he might not be the sole survivor of the fire that destroyed his posh home. Is it possible other members of the Furbanks family survived? It's critical we proceed with this week's episode in order to find out. There is, however, one very valuable trivia, one fascinating factoid, one tantalizing technical tidbit about trains that I believe you must know. Even though they are machines, trains can hear. They listen with their engine ears. Episode 11. A Homecoming. Spindle rattled his tin can out of the cathedral with the two rats trailing. On the sides of the buildings, fresh flyers covered up the old, rain-wrinkled Hurley and Pratt circus posters. The new posts announced a $500 reward for the capture of the escaped panther. People were too preoccupied with these new posters, too dazzled by their $500 fantasies, to notice the travelers. Blister, Muck, and Spindle started off in the same direction, trekking away from brackish channel toward the ring and pinky fingers of the Blaakrust streams. They crossed a bridge, knuckled over the Blight spill, and their paths split. Spindle's destination sat nearer the wrist of the river, while Blister and Muck's was nearer the fingertips. The rats stole a ride on a wagon loaded with sacks of barley and flax. Blister imagined for a long time that the clatter of the wagon's wheels was really the clank of Spindle's can, speeding safely across town. Muck observed Blister's far-away gaze in the direction of the banking district. "He'll be fine," he said.
"Do you think I'm worried?"
Blister crossed his arms.
"I don't worry about anyone but myself."
Muck frowned. "Sounds like a dandy decision, a reassuring resolution. Since you're not otherwise occupied with concern, I hope you'll now reflect on the consequences of stealing your daily meal. I told you it would lead to trouble. Maybe now you'll accept Madame Putresca's obliging overture." Blister could have gagged on the stinky stream of self-righteous snobbery spewing out of Muck's mouth just then. All he said was,
"Maybe now you'll put a sock in it."
After that, they rode in silence. At Baker's Row, Blister pointed out Le Petit Gâteau Bakery with as much indifference as he could muster. Muck marveled at the green awning. He blushed as he recalled his disastrous attempt to hook a lady's hat and steal her newly bought bread. "Why, that's the very bakery where you first tried to teach me how to adopt edibles."
"I know."
"No wonder the name seemed faintly familiar." The incident seemed part of another lifetime. For a moment, Muck could not cross the empty street. Like Blister, he sensed an imaginary door about to open. A threshold was about to be crossed. He did not know what lay on the other side of it. Maybe this Francois Fiet was the Francois Fiet from his home in Wisteria Falls. And then again, maybe he wasn't. Maybe his family had survived the fire. Then again, maybe they had not. The only way to know was to open this imaginary door and step through, no matter what new path he'd be thrown on, no matter what new trajectory he'd be catapulted into. For a time, all the unknowns piled around his ankles. He lingered on the sidewalk, wondering if he ought to turn back. He looked at Blister and, in an instant, knew one thing so certain and so sure that it chased away all the other unknowns. No matter what came next, Blister would be there with him. "Come on," he said, and led the way. They accessed the bakery through a slivered gap in a busted window. The young man who ran the register was still tying on his apron when the rats snuck past. Ghostly clouds of flour drifted through the kitchen, almost like steam rising off hot water. An apple-shaped man stooped forward to shove a tray of breads into an oven big enough to hold an automobile. He wore crisp white attire that miraculously evaded soot smudges, as well as the droplets of dyes used to color cake icings. He wore a tall white toque over a mop of sausage-link hair. "That him?" Blister whispered. Muck tweezed his shoulders. "I can't see his face." The bell over the front door jingled louder than the hum and crackle of the oven's fire. The baker clanked the oven door shut, then bustled into a nearby pantry, never once affording a glimpse of his face. The thump of footsteps approaching from the register drove Blister and Muck into an open sugar barrel. They submerged under the sweet sand, just as the door connecting the kitchen to the business front swung ajar. "Monsieur Fouillet?" the young clerk called. Monsieur was his best attempt at saying Monsieur. The baker emerged from the pantry. The rats eased up through the sugar dunes, careful not to let the clerk see them. The piles of supplies and ingredients cradled in the baker's arms blocked his face from view. "What is it, Richard?" he said. Richard was his best attempt at Richard. "There's a lady up front who wants to know if your breads are made by hand. She says she won't eat nothin' mixed by a greasy electric machine." The baker dropped the sundries on the counter. Muck swallowed a squeak of delight. "Greasy machines?" the baker thundered as he plucked up the electric egg beater and kissed it. "Do not listen to her, mon petit pois." Monsieur Fouillet's lips sneered from under his steak-thick mustache. He switched on the egg beater, and its metal legs whirled. "Look, Richard, I flipped that switch with my hands." He jammed the device down in a bowl full of egg yolks, savaging the gold orbs into yellow cream. "And what do you see here? Are my hands mixing these eggs?" "Well, no, monsieur. That beater is mixing those eggs." "No different than if I used a fork or a whisk. I control the tool. So you tell that customer I definitely make everything by hand." The clerk scurried out of the kitchen. Long after the rats exited the bakery and shook off all the sugar, Blister continued to feel gritty, both outside and in.
"Okay, so that's the baker from your old mansion. What now?"
Blister asked. "Now we do what you suggested weeks ago. we're boarding a train for Wisteria Falls. Rain mizzled to the horizon. Water beads warted the windows of the rattle-rocking caboose. Blister had never traveled out of the city. Those who did raved about the lovely countryside, with its vast skies, fields of flowers, and big as building trees. The rain and fog obscured those views now. Blister supposed the green smear beyond the glass was countryside or pasture. Was there a difference? He also supposed the brown splotches on the fields were cows, and the dingy gray splotches were sheep. Blister sludged away from the window. He sat beside Muck, who perched on a travel trunk, swinging his legs, humming a pirate shanty. "Mums and Daddums will be deliriously delighted to meet you," Muck ribbed Blister's side.
Neat.
"Can you imagine how my sisters will react when they see I'm alive?"
No, I can't.
"I'm willing to bet they'll be shamefully shocked, or maybe morosely mortified. Oh, but that's unkind. Perhaps they'll be joyously jubilant."
Muck, I don't know if it's a good idea to get your hopes up so high.
Muck frowned. "I suppose you are right. Better to first fetch all the facts. No sense in weaning ourselves on wishes." For a time, only the rattling of the train cars conversed. Pa-thunk-a-thunk, pa-thunk-a-thunk. "What do you suppose has happened with Horchata and the other addled animals? Do you think the physician can make them speak again?" Muck asked.
I hope not.
The reply burped out of Blister before he could stop it. Quickly he corrected.
I mean, I hope. Not that we can know anything until we get back.
The train cars traded secret opinions. Pa-thunk-a-thunk, pa-thunk-a-thunk. Muck touched Blister's back. "I'm not mad at you. I hope you know that."
Mad at me? You mean for the wharf rats?
No. That would be silly. Wharf rats are like an act of nature. They are like a hurricane or a tornado, bound to strike at some point. I meant for your contemptible concealment of food. At first, I was absolutely angry you'd lied to me, supremely sullen and factually furious. But I'm not now. I forgive you." Such a surge crashed through Blister just then, leaving him simultaneously explosive and snuffed. The brakes clamped down, and the train's metal wheels shrieked as they skidded over the rails. The train gradually halted, and the conductor hopped out on the platform.
Wisteria Falls! Wisteria Falls! This is our stop,
Blister said. Muck directed the journey from the train station. He led Blister through the charming village where wisteria did indeed fall. Actually, it glazed, it coated, it caked, with its broad-leaf fronds spread over every building, roof, sides, and front. Its flowers cascaded in cones of cream and lavender. The effect, in combination with the rain, was that of a floating floral waterfall. Muck recognized a local farmer who lived near his home. The farmer unloaded the last ruffled heads of cabbage and lettuce from his horse-drawn cart. The produce took up new residence in the wicker shopping baskets hooked to ladies' arms. Their coins found a new home in the farmer's money pouch. But they did not live there long. While the farmer ducked into a nearby shop, Muck and Blister ducked under the wool blanket in the back of the cart, which had previously shielded the produce from the rain. The farmer carried a throb-red apple out of the shop. He climbed into the front bench seat beside his young son and handed over the apple. Then He shook the reins to get the horse going. They clopped a long ways from the village. At last, the cart rumbled past the driveway with an address sign marked Breathless House. Some said the mansion had been given the name because its stunning, eloquent beauty left one entirely breathless. Others swore the sobriquet stemmed from walking the long, long, long driveway, which had the same effect. The rats hopped from the wagon and began the long, soggy journey. Muck awed when a snippet of the mansion emerged through the shaggy boughs of the spruces, horse chestnuts, ash, and rowan trees. "Look at it, Blister! Is it not a fantastical feast for the eyes?" The portion Blister saw looked pristine. Inside his ribcage, the many pinching crabs of worry eased their grip. He began to believe that all was well, that the house had been restored following the fire, that Muck's family was there now, enjoying a typical day. Overcome with excitement, Muck took to all four paws and bounded the remaining length of the driveway. Blister did the same. "Mumsy! Daddums!" Muck belted with joy. "I'm home!" They cleared the dense forest lining the drive. The whole mansion came into view. Muck, then Blister, skidded to a halt. The snippet they'd seen was the only unspoiled portion of the house. Elsewhere, soot stains bruised the stone walls and spread like plague sores from the busted windows. Great piles of stone and brick rivered down from where mighty walls once stood. The walls that had not fallen wore gaping, jagged holes, toothed with stray boards. So much of the exterior was missing that entire portions of the interior were plainly visible. Exposed plumbing pipes, warped by the intense heat of the fire, coiled and draped like jungle snakes. Rubble from collapsed upper floors littered the lower floors. Cracked plaster cauliflowered the walls or clotted on the rubble like rotten milk clumps. Shredded strands of singed, mold-blotched wallpaper festooned the once great rooms. Their dark ruffles bore an eerie resemblance to the farmers' leafy heads of lettuce and cabbage. Indeed, the whole estate had the look of a tossed and rotted salad. The rain fell in earnest. Its efforts kept Breathless House just that. Breathless, suffocated, stifled. When Blister could no longer digest any more of the ruinous spectacle, he gazed at Muck. When he could not tolerate the sight of so much heartbreak, he looked back at the forest. After a time, Muck's gaze also drifted to the forest. He indicated a grove of lime trees leading to a campanile, what Blister would have called a fancy stone gazebo. "Daddums always took his pack of barking beetles for walks there. He loved his consistent constitutionals, persistent perambulations." Blister nodded, unsure of what to say. "The library used to be there." Muck pointed to the collapsed section of a long wing jutting off one side of the estate. "Mumsy spent her days there. She regularly read to us. We had our lessons there with tutors."
"Oh, so that's where you learned Swahili."
Blister smiled. Muck almost grinned. Rain soaked through their fur and dripped off their whiskers. Muck pointed to an upper story where rooms had once existed. "We lived there, all of us. Not in the walls, but in an actual room. The people never used it. We only had to hide when servants came to dust."
"Sounds cozy,"
Blister offered when he could find nothing better. The rain pattered and tapped.
"You know where else is cozy?"
Blister asked. Muck shook his head.
The belfry in the cathedral. I can't wait to get it cleaned up. Get the candles lit, hang up all those smashing streamers and beautiful banners you made. Won't that feel nice?
I suppose so, Muck mumbled with an indifferent nod. The nod scraped like a match on Blister's inner tinder. He was beginning to suspect that all he had ever offered Muck was shabby, poor, and crude. All they had ever shared was paltry, compared to the palace Muck knew and clearly still longed for. The bell tower was second best, had always been, would always be. And for all that is yet to come, for all that will emerge from this feeling, I for one can extend a truly tender sympathy to Blister. It is no pleasant experience to witness the decay of the private, glittering castles we build in our own minds and hearts. It is no easy moment to see suddenly through the lens of reality, which reduces grandeurs and treasures to ordinary hodgepodge and rags. Sharp is the knife that cuts between us and our imagined, idealized world. Sickening is the swing that catapults us out of fantasy and into the hard, messy, and magicless world.
Suppose.
Blister's paws fisted.
Cockroach casserole. You don't have to suppose. You know it for a fact. Just like you know your past isn't as golden and perfect as you're painting it now. Sure, Dad'ums loved to take his beetles for walks, but he wouldn't let you have your own pet bug. And sure, Mumsy made you learn all kinds of languages, but no one taught you how to survive on your own. And sure, you and your sisters lived a cozy life in the forgotten room of a fancy mansion. But those same sisters also tied you up and booted you down laundry chutes for fun.
Muck gaped. Even if he could have spoken, the combustion engine currently driving Blister's scolding was too relentless to allow for any interruptions.
I don't mean to be cruel, but you've got to face facts, old chap. This world is gone.
Blister flicked a paw at the ruins.
The life you lived here is gone. It's in the past. Be grateful you have memories. Some of us aren't even lucky enough to have those. But keep in mind, that's all they are. Memories. They aren't real. What you have now is real. And all you have now is, well, what you have now. Learn to love it. Learn to let go of the past. I wish it weren't so, but your family is gone. They're dead.
Actually, they are being alive. Another voice chimed in behind them. Gadzooks, Blister has a fiery temper. Perhaps his outburst was a tad immature. Hopefully his friendship with Muck isn't damaged beyond repair. Tune in next week when we find out how the Furbanks escaped the devastating flames. Did they, for example, pack a soot case? In the meantime, stop by blisterandmuck.com and use the contact form to tell me what you think will happen next. Know any train jokes better or worse than this one? What do you call a tired train? A slocomotive. While you're at the site, you can also check out the links to the fascinating articles, videos, and books related to the many topics that come up on this show. Be sure to browse the gift shop, where we have the perfect t-shirt, face mask, or hat for conspirators who love this show. A portion of every purchase helps this podcast return week after week. And when your gift arrives, you'll find a special surprise from the entire Blister and Muck crew. You also support the show when you tell others how much you enjoy it. and then you grab their phone and hack past their security codes and bookmark Blister and Muck for them on their favorite podcast app. Special thanks to composer Roland Rudzitis for serving up the Blister and Muck theme song. Additional music from Mon Plaisir, Kevin MacLeod, and Chad Crouch. I Do Music's Made It Rain. Horse and carriage sounds from Sound Ideas Com. The train and whistle came from Daniel Simeon. Felix Bloom rattled the can. Extra special thanks to my family, friends, and fans. One for one, and all for you.